Some time ago, the struggle covered a police brutality protest in New Britain, Connecticut. It concerned a case where police shot into a car, killing one man and injuring two others. Police said the car was believed to be involved in carjackings. The two injured men are now on trial. I'll be speaking to two members of the Elm City chapter of the Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement, a group in Connecticut that describes itself as concerned with ending state oppression, the prison system, and police brutality. So good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
So talk about what happened in December 2017.
There were three young people driving in a car in New Britain, Connecticut, and they turned into a side street, and there was a cruiser waiting for them, and then they were immediately surrounded by four unmarked vehicles. Their car was rammed, and the car spun a bit. It was rammed two more times in addition to that first time, and the young folks were understandably frightened and tried to get away. And at that point, police officers from the unmarked cars got out of their cars with their weapons and shot into the young people's car. The driver was killed, and the two passengers were both injured.
And what's the name of the people involved?
The driver was Zoe Dowdell. The front seat passenger is Caleb Tisdall, and the back seat passenger is Noah Young. So Caleb Tisdall and Noah Young are currently incarcerated, and were both injured by police fire that night.
So what do the police say was going on? Why did they surround this car, ram it, and so on?
Their narrative was, it's changed a lot over time. And if you have anything to add, please interrupt me as I'm speaking. And initially, they said it was a police chase. So they said that they were chasing this car, which was not the case at all. Their current narrative from the official investigation that the state's attorney conducted says that they believe the car was in connection with some unsolved armed robbery cases, and so they were tracking this particular car for that reason. That's their official story. I can't say more than that, or also if I believe that, I don't know.
And I mean, carjackings are a serious problem. But how would you describe the police conduct? What is your, evaluation of whether they were right in what they did?
My position is that they murdered Zoe Dowdell. They released dash cam footage, and their narrative is that the justification for the shooting is that they feared for their life, and the closest officer that could have perceived to have been in fear for his life literally could have stepped one step out of the way of a moving vehicle, and in doing so, he did do that and point blank shot into the car on the driver's side. And I think I'm not sure if the police have made it clear who they believe the fatal shots were fired by, but that man was shooting with the intent to kill in a non-life-threatening scenario.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've seen the dash. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I fully agree, and I think suspicion of the most serious crime is not licensed to murder someone without, that's just not licensed to murder, right? That's where we stand on it.
Now, I have seen the dash cam video, and it does look like as they were trying to flee that an officer was pushed, basically. And but then they shoot, and then they clearly shoot when it's way past them, unless I misinterpreted it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. the initial firing where the car is really close, and then as it's sort of driving away from the cars, they're just sort of shooting into the car essentially.
How many times
Yeah.
did they shoot? How many officers shot?
There 28 bullets, rounds. I don't know.
Rounds?
Is the correct? Yeah, but also, so there were 5 officers. There's 8 officers named in the report, but initially I believe that there were 5 officers. Do you have any clarifying things to say about that? I might have muddied that up. Sorry.
I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Now, at the protest that the struggle covered last October, some of the chants were saying the police were racist. Is that something you believe?
Oh, well, okay. I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, the police, the institution of the police force is very much in service of a nation that is built on racism, right? So it doesn't even have to be a question of were these 5 individuals individually racist. We know that people and law enforcement are people, right, are socialized to have internal biases that they may not even have ever examined against black and brown folks, but specifically black young men, and all 3 of these young men were black, are black. So I absolutely would completely say that racial bias was a part of this egregious act and tragedy. Yes.
To add on a little bit to that, just so the sort of the institution of policing in America is rooted in slave hunting patrols, and slave hunting patrols were organized by the state in the late 1800s as a way to give citizens the capacity and sort of the license to hunt, to track and hunt runaway slaves. And what that sort of process and the mental process that goes into that is it's an othering process, right? So it has these normal citizens who are not agents of the state. They become agents of the state, and their express purpose is to hunt these others, quote unquote. And we see that sort of the reverberations of that origin in modern policing in the way that black and brown people are othered by police. And this is an egregious example of that.
Now, getting to the specific case, some will say, well, carjacking's a problem. They suspected this car had been involved in a crime, and I think I read somewhere that violence had been used, maybe a gun. The police had to do something. Well, what would you say would have been the alternative for their behavior rather than shooting these people?
Like, car pursuits are always bad. They result in injury, maiming, and death. So I think that as far as, the reality of citizens dealing with police and police in communities, I'm very against any kind of automobile pursuit. So this should not have happened in the first place, where they're sort of ready for action in an automobile environment.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if I can speak to, what could have been done better or something like that. I don't know if I can unpack that right now. What I will say, though, is there should never have been the potential for this kind of tragedy to even come into being.
I was just going to say I agree. It's a hard question to answer because I agree with all that analysis about, car-based policing, like chasing cars, specifically targeting them. That just has ended so dangerously in so many cases. And if we're really talking about protecting, civilians in the community, chasing folks in cars, which is what the police said they were doing that night, is deeply dangerous to everyone around, right? So, yeah, I think it shouldn't have happened. But in addition to that, these were 4 unmarked cars that were tracking, stalking, chasing, hunting this one car. It's hard for me to imagine any justification for that kind of behavior from a police force.
Okay, let me change the discussion at the moment. So there's 2 men who were wounded are facing trial. What are the charges? What's going on there?
So Caleb, who was the front seat passenger and is 16, he turned 16 in jail. He was 15 at the time. He's facing several charges of armed robbery, possession of narcotics, and possession of a pistol without a permit. Only 2 of those charges are from the night in question. The other charges are essentially the armed robbery cases that were opened and the police hadn't been able to sort of solve. So it's kind of a collection of armed robbery charges from across the state that got pinned to Caleb. Noah is facing charges of possession, risk of injury to a minor, possession of a pistol without a permit, and 1 charge of armed carjacking with a really tenuous connection. There's a very small thing that connects him to that. And so both boys are facing charges that are a little suspicious and have continued to grow. So there's been more, the longer they've been in the state's custody or possession, the more charges that have been lodged against them.
So they're not so they're not on bail.
They're not on bail. No.
What is
one part of the case that that is so outrageous, and we wanted to sort of focus on a reason that we wanted to focus on the case itself, just because there's so many moving parts that go into it. One of them is the outrageously high bails that have been set. So
yes.
For these kinds of crimes that they've both been charged with, the 2 survivors, the original bail that was set for Noah was $1.1 million, which is unprecedented.
Yeah.
And it has been since dropped down, but it's still set, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, at $400,000, meaning that,
yep.
$40,000 is just too much money. And then Caleb is on, the bail is set at $185,000, which again is just outrageous. We find it outrageous and deeply suspicious given the circumstances where
yeah.
the bail is unprecedented in its amount, and we think that there's no coincidence between that high bail and the fact that they're witnesses to the murder.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And for our listeners, generally, with bail, number one, it's not supposed to be a punishment. It's just to make you ensure that you come up to your trial. You go to a bail bondsman, and they charge you 10%. So, and you don't get that money back. You pay that to the bail bondsman. So, as was said by one of our speakers, $400,000. That means $40,000 that you never get back, that you would somehow have to raise.
Yeah.
So that is pretty high bail.
For 13 months for two different holiday seasons, because this happened December 14th, last December, right? So both Christmases, both young men have
2017, yeah.
Yeah. So for 13 months, these a 16-year-old and 19-year-old have been in a cell. The 19-year-old is in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day in northern, northern, sorry. And, there's just been so many reports of mistreatment from both of them. So it's even more of an abuse of humans using the bail system, misusing the bail system, let me say, because it's not intended, as you said, Stan, to keep folks locked up. It's intended to make them show up for their court hearings.
And your personal interests in the case of these two men, is it about police brutality or fair trials? How did you, without getting personal, why are you particularly interested in this?
I think it seems like well, first of all, we've had a lot of police shootings in Connecticut, and this seems like another case where the police officers involved are not seeing any consequences, while the people involved and the victims of their actions are. So it seems like a real and total breakdown of justice. So I think our interest is in justice, but our interest is also in liberation. I mean, there's two young folks sitting in a cell when they should be out here talking to lawyers and able to defend themselves better, and also able to talk about what they witnessed that night. And then the third thing for me personally is the psychological torment of prisons that these young people are experiencing right now after experiencing the murder of their friend, watching it happen. They were in the car he was driving when he was shot while he was driving. I cannot imagine the depth of that trauma, and I know that prison is not the place, it's not a place for anybody, right? But it's certainly not a great place for two young folks to be processing that. So I think our interest is justice and liberation.
If people want to learn more about this case, is there a website or some other way, phone number that people could get in touch?
Yeah, there's a really good write-up of this or article on a site called It's Going Down, and the title of that is Legal Fund for Two Survivors of Police Murder, and this particular article addresses what happened that night. And also it addresses the dash cam footage. It was written shortly after the dash cam footage was released to the public. So it's the most recent analysis of the entire thing.
So you say...
There's also...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, there's also our group has a website called revolutionaryabolition.org.
Oh, yeah.
All right, why don't we put both of those links on in the YouTube in the comment section, perhaps?
That'll be great. Also, both of those links will include a link to the fund itself, the page for the fund itself, which also has a write-up.
So let's talk about that. I understand there's some kind of time limit on the fundraising. What is the story there?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
So we're in the process of raising $5,000. This is for the families of the two survivors to aid them in navigating the legal hellhole that is the criminal justice system in the state of Connecticut. It has been, I think, a rocky road, and this money is being raised to, sort of aid in that process. And we, it's the format of the fundraiser is like an all or nothing time limit kind of thing, the time limit being January 31st.
So there's about 10 days. And what is the company, let's say? Is it GoFundMe or is it something else?
It's called Fire Fund. It's a leftist-oriented fundraising platform that's based in Denmark.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So when folks go to donate, they're going to see the designation in euros, and that's just simply because it's an international platform based out of Denmark, run by activists.
So the fund is to raise money for the legal defense of these two people who were in this car where there had been a police shooting.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you both for speaking with me.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having us.